Okay, to calculate the GDP deflator, after you have the nominal GDP and the real GDP, you can then take the nominal GDP divided by the real GDP, right? And what that looks like, if I'm going to do the GDP deflator, I'll put it in this box here, it's going to be equal to nominal GDP in a specific year divided by the real GDP. You'll multiply that by 100. And this is how you index. So we find out that the index in 2015 is 104.321. The index in the base year, which this is going to be 2016, is just going to be the nominal GDP, 3792, divided by 3792 times 100. So I would be dividing nominal GDP divided by real GDP, which is just going to equal 100. That will always be the same in the base year. Let me ungray that. All right, and then to calculate, let me put this, let's call this right here. This is the index in 2015. This is the index in 2016. The index in 2017 is going to be nominal divided by real GDP. And you'll remember that on the exam because they're in alphabetical order. N comes before R. All right? And what the book says is that the index, the GDP deflator, allows us to make comparisons and measure inflation. Right? So to actually measure the inflation rate, know how to do inflation, right? Know. You're going to take the new, N, minus the O, old, divided by the old times 100. Know how to do an inflation rate, or percentage change is really what I should call it. So here I would take 100 minus old, 104. I have to put these in parentheses so that the, all right, so new minus old divided by old. All of that times 100. All right, so what that tells me is that between 2015 and 2016, we saw a negative 4.15 percentage change, right? Whenever it is negative or less than zero, right, that's always going to be labeled as deflation. All right, let's look now between 2017 2016. Remember here we're going to compare the indices. Know how to do a percentage change. Go ahead and put me on hold and figure out what the percentage change is between 2017 GDP deflator and 2016 GDP deflator. Remember, you only want to go back not to necessarily the base year, but when you're calculating inflation, you go back to the previous period. So if they ask you what the inflation rate is between 2017 or for 2017, you are only looking at 2016. You are not going back to the base year. You are not going back to the very first year. You're going to the previous year. Okay, so they would be the new minus old divided by old times 100. And I'm still going to put the formula in here when those cancel out. All right, divided by 100 times 100. All right, mathematically these would cancel out. And what you're left with is showing that the inflation rate between new minus old over old shows you that you again notice how we had deflation again. Right? The only reason it is considered to be deflation is because this is a negative number. All right, let's try something different. All right, instead of having a negative number here, let's say this number had been, oh, let me erase that, all right? Let's say instead the prices had actually changed. Let's say here the price went to, I'm sorry, the quantity changed. Let's say here the quantity went to 10. The quantity here went to 28. Here we're going to go to 15. And here we're going to go to 300. All right, let me get back down. instead of 300, let's go with 18. All right. So if I go with 18 instead, what we find out is everything changes here. All right. But I'm still using 2016 as the base year so that the index doesn't change that year. But as you can see, the rates are going to change. This is basically what you just call a rate change. Right? It's just a percentage change. Right? When it is greater than 0, it is considered to be inflation. So instead of deflation, it's going to be inflation. The other example that I have on the book happens to be something called disinflation. And all disinflation means is that, let's say I had another year. If I had another year and let's say the rate change was less than 1.5, like 1.3. All right. 1.3 is still positive, so it's inflation, but because it's not as high as the previous year, we call that disinflation. So make sure for the exam you understand deflation, meaning the rate change is negative. Inflation, it's positive. And disinflation, it's positive, but not as great as the previous year. Right? So for example, if this had been a 2, this would not be disinflation because it's increasing. This would have just been inflation. Right? And that's gross domestic product.